make sure you get the one that's now going around. It's kind of neat change, but anyway, the 3 handouts are going around. And I just want to, Steve isn't here today, so he has to introduce the speakers, so I will. So we have the fabulous Jen Rhodes, SVU. And then for those of you who don't know Kate Horn-Murphy, she's with the Division of Criminal Justice, and she is the state crime victim and bail administrator. There you go. She's an expert in crime victim comp and bail for our state. And then some of you may not know Tanya Isengard, who's with our office and is the crime victim compensation administrator. So thanks very much.
One of the reasons that prompted this training, there's been some change in the case laws with regard to crime victim compensation, but in addition to that, or maybe because of that, I guess is a better way to say it, we have made some changes within the office, and that's something that Allison and Cheryl and some others with the office have been working on as far as policy and procedure. We've come up with what we think is the best changes to those policy and procedures. One of the handouts covers that, but that being said, as this new procedure gets started, if you find things that would be easier for you as the attorneys in the courtroom or navigating through action to follow the updates on crime victim compensation, please let us know.
Definitely. Let us know. We can tweak this in the future if we need to.
One of the other handouts that we may refer to, Kate and I may refer to throughout the presentation is very helpful, condensed, believe it or not, compensation guide for DA's office. It's stapled, it's multiple pages back and front, but I assume that you all are like me, which is, I don't know this, and so every time I have an issue, I have to research it, and I take things for granted that this crime victim comp or restitution is just going to go through until the challenge comes right there at sentencing. And there's been some changes back in 2015 about notifying the victim, and things would need to be set over. So it's often an afterthought, to be honest, for us attorneys in the courtroom. You've got your plea, now you've got your sentence, and you're like, oh, I got to deal with my CBC claim or my restitution claim. And hopefully you can put some thought and process into that prior to going in for sentencing. But I know it comes up, so we're trying to make it easier for you in this new action process. So to start off with, and Kate will cover most of the policy structure type of slides, but I think we forget sometimes because Tanya and her staff is right down the hall from us, that they're not part of our office. And so the district, or certainly the defense attorneys and judges, certain judges that don't know criminal law, might think, hey, they're in your office. You can get this information. The DA's office is in, quote, possession of it. But it's not true. They are not part of the DA's office. So just because they're housed here, it's a separate setup.
They are employees.
I was going to say, I want to emphasize that Tanya and the compensation staff are part of your team, but what they do statutorily is separate distinctly and should be secure from what the other work product that the district attorney office produces. And you can always read the statute. This kind of gives just an overview of how the compensation programs are created. But one of the changes that we might stop me if I'm going to jump ahead, that compensation funds, the reason restitution is critical, and even if restitution is an issue, to ensure that the mandatory surcharges are assessed, not waived, is because the money that is collected through these surcharges, the victim compensation and victim assistance, go directly to assist the victims in the first judicial district. So those surcharges on the compensation side are going to pay for the medical bills, funeral, counseling of victims. On the victim assistance side, it's going to grants to agencies that provide, that employ advocates to serve victims. So that's a really critical point. You probably all are familiar a little bit with those surcharges. There's no general funds that come from the Colorado State Assembly for these services. So what you bring in at the first is what is available for the first to serve the victims in your community. It is, at this point, it has been for over a decade, inadequate. And so for that reason, the first is one of several judicial districts that it qualifies to receive federal compensation funds. And even at that point, it's still not adequate to cover the needs. So it becomes really critical. You guys are boots on the ground, front line, in the courtroom, making sure that these funds are getting ordered through restitution or through surcharges. That's anybody's questions.
So, the statute allows for $30,000 maximum for payouts on each claim. That is what the statute says. However, based on the decreased funding, our policy here in the first is $20,000. So hopefully we can increase our revenue and move that back up to the $30,000 maximum. Anytime that a victim submits an invoice to us, let's say a medical invoice, it has to go through a collateral source. All of their collateral sources first. So if they have insurance, that bill has to be submitted to their insurance, and then if there are deductibles, co-pays, that sort of thing left, then that's something the crime victim compensation can cover. Our local payment policies in our judicial district, we handle claims from primary, secondary, and then witnesses to crime. And we are limited to what we pay out on. So we, here in this judicial district, would pay for mental health, medical, loss of support, doors, locks, windows that are damaged during the commencement of the crime, burial, lost wages, security systems, and any kind of crime scene cleanup. But the main thing that I want to kind of talk about is that every claim that comes through our office goes through like an extensive verification process to make sure that those losses are related to the crime in which they're requesting it. So for instance, if somebody is asking for mental health, we are asking for treatment plans from the mental health providers, and those treatment plans have to be specific to the crime in which they're requesting those funds for. We have limits to how much we can pay out, so our policy limits us to $90 per session for individual sessions, and then there are a couple of other specialty type of therapy like EMDR that we also pay out on. So I guess with like lost wages, for instance, we're getting notes from doctors, mental health providers, making sure that those lost wages are part of the crime, and for how long those people were out of service and not able to go to work. We're also getting information from their employers to find out for sure how many days they've missed, and then we're getting their pay stubs so that we can calculate exactly what those losses are. So when you guys get the restitution request, the dollar amounts that are on there have been extensively gone through by our staff to make sure that they are actually crime related. That's basic. I'm just going to kind of do a quick overview of our process. So oftentimes this happens on scene when they meet with a victim witness specialist, but the victim completes an application and then they submit a bill or a treatment plan, something that verifies that there was actually a loss. And so then the staff goes to work and takes care of the verification, making sure that those losses are actually crime related. And then we gather police reports and all information the board is going to need to make a good decision. And we take it to our board for review. Those our board meetings happen once a month, and so it can take a little bit of time to get that process completed. But when it goes to the board makes a decision on that, whether or not they're going to approve it or deny it. There are specific reasons why they can deny it per statute. So then immediately after the board meeting, payments are made and notifications are sent out to the victims to notify them that we've made payment on their behalf. And then the next process is that we submit and ask for restitution.
Can you talk about when the application is triggered and goes out from victim witness? Our victim witness office?
When we file the case. In a few days, the case filing will go out.
Does it have, it used to have a time to return it by. I haven't seen one.
Not for comp, it doesn't.
Okay.
And do you want to mention here about the added language that we're going to be adding on the payment sheet?
So when you get the, we're gonna scan in the sheet that shows the losses, and the request for restitution. We've added some language that basically says that it is specific to the crime. It talks about statute a little bit. It talks about the possibility that these losses might not be the entire loss. So like, for instance, our lost wages policy, just as an example, our policy only allows for 30 days immediately following a crime. So let's say that victim is out of work for 2 months or 3 months or 4 months, or is not able to return to work. Then what we know is that they're going to have additional losses that could also be requested through restitution to the victim, not through restitution to them. So take a look at that language, it's really good.
Do you guys know what that payment sheet is that we're talking about? Most of the folks know what that looks like. Okay, it's the backup. It's the backup for the restitution request. So it'll say like mental health, $120, right? Funeral expenses, $2,000. And in the past, that's all it kind of said was, it says the victim's name and stuff, and it has the breakout. Tanya, is we're going to be adding this additional language to that sheet in hopes that helps you a little bit with defense counsel, because we know that you get questions from defense counsel saying, well, just this saying lost wages and the amount isn't good enough for me. I need additional information. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about today is the confidentiality of those records. And we don't want you to think that comp isn't trying to be helpful for you in getting restitution to comp for us, which we appreciate. But we definitely have to maintain the confidentiality of those records, so that's where the issue lies. So hopefully adding that language will help in some cases. We'll talk about the restitution hearing and stuff. If we have to have a restitution hearing, we can. But hopefully that added language might help a little bit to say, look, the Crime Victim Comp Board vets all this. They're mandated to vet it. These are the processes, and so this is related to the crime, period. We'll see if it helps.
Well, what about the application process in county court? Because it's one thing in felony land where cases are quote, filed by our office, but obviously when we receive summonses in county court, when does the application trigger there?
I mean, a lot of times that happens on scene. So a victim advocate from the law enforcement office
Should be.
provides that
If
information.
they're called.
Yeah, and then our office also sends it out. So there's multiple options.
I mean, the law enforcement victim advocates, for the most part, and we have how many different law enforcement agencies? Yikes, 15, something like that? 22? Okay, a lot. But for the most part, the law enforcement advocates in the first JD are screening VRA cases every day after the crime occurs, and they should be sending out a crime victim comp application to every victim on a VRA case right after the crime occurs. Pending we have good addresses, right, and all that stuff. And then we actually send out another application once the case gets processed through our office. So they should be getting these applications pretty quickly. They should be.
Yeah. Some of the common questions, as we mentioned, and Kate prepared this document based on some other documents she has, should be answered in your compensation guide, but we frequently, for years, and continue to get routine questions from not only defense attorney or the court about how do I know, like I need a breakdown, what are these medical expenses for? I had a case just recently where I had some medical expenses and it was unclear whether it was from some sort of treatment of her injuries or for a suicide hold that's happened as a result of her disclosure of her sexual abuse. And the defense was then arguing, kind of one of the other ones, well, there's a whole bunch of other issues why this victim, attempted suicide, so why should my client be on the hook for that?
So this handout, it's titled in the top Victim Compensation Guide for DA Personnel. The first page has got confidentiality. If you look beyond the next pages, it outlines for you how to address a lot of the arguments, how to start forming arguments to a lot of these questions. And then The second handout here has some more case-specific arguments to be made. These were put together by my predecessor, Anthony Tilger, who is an attorney. I'm not an attorney, guys, let me relax. I did 30 years in a stint in Adams County Broomfield DA's office. But what I do know, like the back of my hand, is the compensation statute. And I do know that you all do have the skill set and the ability to put together these arguments. But that's what these tools are to help you do, is address the questions that come up, but also to shut down the defense fishing expeditions and stonewalling repayment of compensation funds that by statute are owed to the compensation program. So part of this is again, in these handouts, and it legitimizes your arguments about the compensation board is an administrative process. There's certain case law and statutes that say that administrative process has a presumptuable, what's that word? There's a presumptuable opinion, or it's presumed to be correct because they follow certain procedures, the application, those types of things. So look through the documents, because I think a lot of times this is something that's not in your regular wheelhouse. Criminal law is, but restitution and those questions then started going into a civil nature more and how to argue those. It is a part of the criminal case too, the whole restitution piece. There's several stop gaps in there in our process that standardizes it and enforces that it's an administrative process. And at the end of the day, the expenses approved and by the board have been vetted. So it's not this question of they're just willy-nilly making payments to victims or for victims that defense gets to poke and prod at. They have been vetted, verified, they comport with statute and standards, they are overseen, they are administered, both not only locally on your first level, but I come around every 3 years and do monitoring visits of every judicial district compensation program to make sure that their statute and standards are being complied with. So there's oversight at the local level, which raises this up to this isn't just a haphazard type process. So as Tanya mentioned, the things that are being paid for are being verified as being directly related to the crime. Documentation's required that have dates of service, types of service that comport with dates of law enforcement reports, dates of injury. All boards are required to have a 45, 60-day claim processing time. I think the JEFCO is around 30 days, which is pretty standard for the metro area, and boards can approve and deny. So you've heard Tanya talk about cap payments. Many of you are, especially in your larger dollar loss cases, are going to be dealing with what compensation paid and what they were not able to pay. And so that's going to be your restitution to victims. And so that also is challenging to get that documentation, but it is as important. But understand that you can have a medical bill that was partially paid by comp and partially paid by a victim, and restitution needs to encompass both those. Does that make sense, guys? So why deny? Do you want to roll on this? We just roll right through this because I think really you're more interested in what's paid and how to argue that. But if things are denied, it's because a loss was incompensable, which means that's our term for saying it doesn't fit the statute. So it's for something that is not allowed by statute. The easiest thing is motor vehicle theft. There's nothing in the statute that allows compensation funds to be used to replace a car. So that's not a compensable loss. Losses exceed funds available. You heard Tanya speak about the cap drop from 20 to 30. There are going to be some things now that compensation program here just can't pay for. The crime's not compensable. Theft. I just had the disability coalition contact me because a caretaker has stolen $10,000 worth of property from her disabled client. How can comp help? Comp can't. When it comes to theft, even if it's an at-risk adult or individual, comp doesn't cover theft. Crime not reported to law enforcement. That means there's a number of sex assault survivors, primarily in domestic violence, that can't apply for comp because they've not reported the crime to police. No crime found by law enforcement. That is what it is. Police look at it, you've got an incident report, not an offense report. Crime occurred in another jurisdiction, that's a favorite. Sheridan West goes to Jeffco. Sheridan East, Adams gets it. So it's where the crime occurred is where a victim is eligible to apply. Wrongful act, that's a whole, also known as contributory conduct. That's a whole weighted thing that your board, each local board will look at, the actions of the victim in proximity and in relationship to the crime or the death that occurred, injury. That's really a local decision, but it is a factor for denial. Substantially provocative, substantially attributable, kind of involved in that. Wrongful acts would be your drug dealer who doesn't bring the goods to the drug deal, gets shot under the VRA. They're a victim. For comp, probably not. So you can have that of what it feels like a disconnect, and then cooperation. And for most judicial districts, cooperation is appear and be truthful. So if you're subpoenaed, come to court. This one, I just do a little soapbox plug. If you have an issue what appears non-cooperation, I really encourage you to utilize your advocates and utilize your communication skills and ask more questions. Because what appears to be non-cooperation could actually be fear of retaliation, fear of harassment, intimidation. It could be issues of economy, that someone just cannot afford to come to court for the fourth time, because if they do, they will lose their job. So before you just rush to that judgment of non-cooperation, ask more questions, because you may have a victim whose need is up here and it's coming out in a way that you aren't hearing it because you just see the behavior.
And I think if you have any questions, you can always refer them to the victim comp board. But my experience has been what Allison told me, they field the most complaints probably in that idea of wrongful acts, right? And again, it's not a beyond a reasonable doubt, it's more of a civil standard on how they determine, like Kate said, if the drug dealers, brings the drugs there or something. And so a lot of times families, even in homicide cases, will complain because they're not covered under crime victim compensation.
Do you want to mention the reconsideration process just briefly? And there is a process through the comp board. If somebody is denied, that they can request a reconsideration and be heard by the comp board. So just so you guys know that too. There may be additional information that the victim wants to share, like there wasn't in the police report, that is kind of boosts their requests. It may overcome the reason for the denial. So we do have that process in place.
We'll tell you statewide, and especially for Jeffco, the denial rate is like 2% or less.
Really low.
It's very, very low. So confidentiality, one of my favorite soapboxes now. So in 2015, we changed the compensation statute, to kind of stonewall the fishing expeditions that we were experiencing on the compensation administrator level from defense attorneys, who wanted to say treatment isn't related to the crime, or we don't want to have restitution order unless we know what each and every bill was paid, and we want a copy of the treatment plan, and it was a fishing expedition. So the statute reads, any materials received, made, or kept, or information by the compensation board or the district attorney to process an application are confidential. And there is no option for a victim to waive that confidentiality. The confidentiality is not theirs, it is the compensation programs. So when advocates, service providers are contacting your compensation program for information about a claim, like how many therapy sessions were approved, the appropriate protocol is the compensation program staff contacts the victim to clarify that information. We have lanes. That's how we work well together on the highway of victim assistance. We have lanes. Some of them have dotted lines, like sometimes in court you have law enforcement advocates and DA advocates, but we stay in our lanes. Compensation lane is the compensation claim file information. Advocate lane is criminal justice processes information. So when you get that kind of referral, it's a deputy DA, a victim doesn't know what's going on with the claim, Best thing to do is give Tanya or her staff that contact information so they can reach out to the victim and clarify it. The purpose is, it's a black and white in many regards. Now, many boards, most boards, if a victim contacts the compensation program and wishes to have information from the file sent to them, generally, most compensation programs will send that information back to the victim or provide it after they verify the victim identity. But that's where when Jen mentioned at the beginning of the session, comp is part of the DA's office, but it's in the DA's office, but not part of. You guys as deputy DAs are firewalled off. You can't wander down the hall and ask Tanya, I want to check on this claim, or I want to see what's in this file. You are as firewalled off as the defense attorney or any third person out. So, in that regard, please do come down and have a conversation with Tanya and Allison before you would ask for an in-camera review that requires you to essentially subpoena your own victim compensation person. It sounds incongruent, but
He didn't perceive himself as a victim, but as we went through the process, he was kind of understanding more, and now he's like, I want to reach out to victim comp. So the question is, do you ask for, Joe Smith's now and reserve, James's for later, or do you just reserve it all for later? We asked for the specific amount we had now, because it was, frankly, I think in Brandon's case, it was concluded. And Darian hadn't even started yet, so we didn't want to mess with that. So we asked for the amount we knew and reserved the rest.
It may not be concluded, so it might be better just to ask for it.
Is that right? Okay.
And real quick before, one of the big things that's important to Allison, and it can move, or all of us, it can move us into our policies.
Never mind,
But
this is what I was going to ask for.
Just so you know, and I don't know that I know Allison ideally we'd like to walk it through in action, but I don't know that we have the time.
Yeah, we don't.
But right there, I at least was able to write the line when you go into your documents to object to waivers of cost and fees. There's a stock motion in action. So you're going to have to modify it to the specifics of your case, but at least there's a starting template. So it's number 32, AD, objection to waive costs. That's the actual thing you see in action. And your secretaries will help you find it if you can't, but it's pretty easy to see. And in addition to that, one of the other information that Kate had given us was a huge notebook on restitution and victim comp information. It was too large and frankly, probably too voluminous, more than you needed. But within there is a bunch of motions and then orders objecting to waivers and costs, and also to victim confidentiality. It was a big deal in the James Holmes case.
yeah.
So Justice Zamora, at least when he was the district court judge there on that case, wrote a bunch of orders on that. And so if you want to steal some language out of that information, we have that information. We just didn't send it because I think it's hundreds of pages.
And if you guys, when you come up with creative solutions, or if you come up with your Stonewall, talk to Tanya, because one of the advantages of sitting at 6th and Kipling is I hear from deputy DAs all over the state, and they may send me stock motions or scenarios type thing, and then I will push those out to the local administrators. So Tanya may very well have some information, or I'm happy also to run your particular case out on our listserv to 22 different programs and try to get information to help you do what you're presented with in your unique situation. So please reach out and use your comp person as the contact. Of course, I'm always happy to take your call directly too, but she may actually have what you need.
Okay, are we ready to go?
Yep.
Okay, so just real quickly again, thank you so much for advocating for restitution for comp. This is very important. I had mentioned in a prior training that we really when we went paperless, we sort of lost our process for getting restitution to comp. So we're trying to go back to this and make sure that we are getting restitution to CDC. Unfortunately, as Kate mentioned, we have more requests than we have funding for, which has meant the board has had to cut crime victim comp payments to victims. And because the biggest payment is for mental health services for counseling, that means we've had to limit victims counseling, and particularly child victims, right? It's troubling. We don't want to do that. We are not nearly as good as collecting restitution to comp as other jurisdictions are in the state. So we really, really appreciate your help in fighting for comp, and that helps us pay for therapy for our victims and a lot of kid victims. So thank you for what you're doing. So here's what we're gonna do. This is a really new process. So if you have any, you've got a handout on it, crime victim comp restitution request procedures. I'll send it out to you electronically after this. But what we're going to do is, because we've gotten a request that Darren has made too for many years of having more information about what comp is paid ongoing, our wonderful CDC staff are going to be more hands-on into making sure we have an updated amount in our action system. Okay, so what's going to happen is the first time the comp makes payment on a claim, we go in and the staff turn on the crime victim compensation indicator. So that's your number one way to look at your case at a glance and see, is this a case that crime victim comp has paid? If in the indicators it says crime victim compensation, they have paid, okay? Then also what the staff will do is in the victim screen, because you can have a case with multiple victims, right? For whatever victim they have paid on, they will go in and there's a CDC paid box field in the victim screen. They'll put $1 in there, $1, just to indicate this is the victim we paid on. Okay, any questions so far? Stop me. Now you guys don't have to look at that, but just so you know that it's there. But the crime victim comp is the big indicator. Then what we'll do in victim witness is we will create a motion in order to crime victim comp for restitution for that initial amount that's paid. We will scan the CDC payment form that shows you what it's paid for, and we are going to put that motion in order in action, as well as the backup documentation in action, and we are going to task the wonderful secretaries. Here's the restitution motion in order, and the secretaries are going to e-file that for you, for the attorney, the initial motion. Thank you, secretaries, for doing that. Any questions about that? So you won't get a task, but there will be a note in the file that comp puts in. It's going to be in green, because green is about money, okay? That says, motion in order for CDC in this amount in the file, and e-filed, task to the secretary to e-file. Are you guys going to put a note in when you e-file it? Do you do a note or no? Correct. You don't have to, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to, because the DA, you're going to get notice that something's been e-filed, right? So you'll get the e-file notice from ISIS.
You're not gonna get an e-notice.
Because you're filing. Okay.
But still, I think it's right there in your court ROE tab.
Yeah. So if they only make one payment, you're good, right? It's already e-filed for you. Still get it ordered. It's going to be in your restitution VIS folder, right? Make sure you get it. The court should order it and make sure you get it ordered at sentencing. The trick and the problem with the change, what we've always missed is when comp continues to make these ongoing payments. So what we're going to do now is as they make ongoing payments for mental health therapy every month, right? After the first payment, we're going to make a subsequent motion in order, and it's going to be called the amended motion in order for restitution to comp. We're going to put that in the file folder. We're going to scan in the updated payment sheet, but then the DA is going to get the task that says, amended motion in order for restitution, e-file this at sentencing, at the time of sentencing. Tyra's got a really weird look on her face. I know, this is hard.
She's fine, she has a small caseload, she's fine.
So.
Just her regular face.
We had a meeting of 12 people to discuss this, so I'm sorry. Here's the problem that we didn't want to do. We don't want to e-file a new motion with the court every month, right? You guys aren't going to like that, and the court's not going to like that. Amended motion, amended motion, amended motion, amended motion. So what we're trying to accomplish is, upon the second payment or subsequent payments, we're going to go in and update the amount in your amended motion every month. We're going to put in a new note in green every month. Here's your new amount. Here's your new amount. And it's going to be updated on your motion. But you guys then have to file it with the court when you get to sentencing. You follow me? Because the problem is comp doesn't know when you're going to sentencing. And we're going to immediate sentencing on a lot of VRA cases these days. So we don't know when that's gonna happen, so we're just gonna try to keep it current for you, but then you have to e-file it.
And having the original one already e-filed, presumably the judge is gonna say, I see a motion for restitution. And then you're gonna quickly look in your folder and see that, judge, I'm gonna file an amended one, you pay more.
Is there something when that original motion is either e-filed or there's something put in action for the line deputies to know that it is going to be an ongoing payout versus a one-time payout? Because
We don't always know that.
well, here's my concern. Here's what I potentially see happening is we get the original motion and we say, okay, defendant, the offer is blank and there's a motion for restitution for CBC for $200 and we have no idea that it's going to be ongoing. They say, yeah, that's fine, I will agree to that. Then we get this amended and they say, I didn't agree to that much, you didn't tell me it was ongoing, and the original deal was for me to pay $200.
I think your conversation with the defendant needs to be, payment from CDC can be ongoing monthly. So at this time, the amount I have is $200, but that can change if somebody is that amount can be increased, right? And we're just gonna have to have that conversation. Now, you will have the most current amount. I don't know if people know, comp is on a monthly cycle, so we pay bills monthly at the end of the month, okay? When's it gonna be updated, do you think, every month for the amount, about when?
Probably the end of the second or third week of the month.
End of the third week of the month, so you guys don't need to remember that, but it's updated monthly. So, and we also honestly wanna get restitution that comp pays after sentencing up to 91 days afterwards if we can. Now that's icing on the cake, and we've never really been able to get that. We know we may not be able to get that, but we're gonna try for it a little bit more. So I hear what you're saying, Tracy, I know that's a concern, but if you go in there and you see it's for mental health, particularly,
That'd be a good red flag for it.
there's probably gonna be ongoing mental health. You know, but we never know either, is the victim gonna drop out of therapy? We don't know, they don't, I mean, we can assume some of these cases, you got a homicide, you got a DD, you got a sex assault, you know the victims go into therapy or you think they are, you probably know it's gonna be ongoing. I mean, it's hard with the medical bills too. These medical bills sometimes really trickle in, because you know, last time you went to the hospital, hopefully you didn't, you get a bill from like 10 people, right? You get the radiologist, you get the ambulance, you get the physician, you get the hospital, and the victims, they trickle in and we pay them sometimes as they come in, okay? So that's kind of the process. I'm trying to think what I'm missing.
Is it gonna be like a, is it a kind of compensation page?
Yes.
That already is, in that gray box, it
Crime
says
compensation. If you have that, that does not mean it's CDC eligible. That is not what that means. It means they paid.
Oh.
Crime victim compensation in the indicator
Correct.
means comp has paid. Do not turn that on yourself.
Nobody
Yes.
should be clicking that.
Nobody
but
turn that
victims
on.
comp.
Yeah.
Victims comp is the only one that clicks.
Because let's be honest, as the attorneys, we don't screen whether that qualifies under CDC or not.
Yes, we should not be clicking that at all.
And so your obligation is I'm not a chief and I'm not an attorney, but I guess I would say in practice, and especially on your VRA cases, I'm hoping that you're looking in the restitution BIS folder every time it's sentencing, right? And if you see an amended motion to comp in there, you need to go, oh, I need to file that. So that's what, and I don't think it hurts to inquire to the court, judge, I have a victim impact statement, did you read it, right? And did you get the motion for restitution? Yeah,
Allison, sorry, I know we're out of time.
that's okay.
but I noticed on the back part of the procedure page, it says language will be contained in a motion that requests restitution be reserved for 91 days. I haven't seen that language on there yet. Is that going to indicate to the court on the motion and order that we
Yes.
have potential for ongoing and that the court should reserve it?
We haven't changed it yet, but our plan is to change that CDC motion to say also could be ongoing for 91 days after sentence.
And we should probably put it on the order.
Oh, on
Yes.
the order, yes.
Because
Okay.
if it needs
We'll
to
need
be
to
in
do that.
order.
Yeah, that, I would appreciate that.
Yes, good catch.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Allison, I think I've heard that there's something things that are not covered by the restitution statute, the CDC pays for them, such as increased security if someone's burglarized. I know we've told them, I'm sorry you don't get cameras outside your house, all that, per the restitution statute, but CDC does cover them, and then we're claiming it as part of restitution. How do we answer
Cameras?
that discrepancy?
Well, I don't know that you ever get to that point, do you? In the sense of, well, one of the things we forgot to mention, which is really key, as the attorney, the victim looks to us to answer all their questions, and you really should punt when it comes to CVC. And by that I mean, don't just say, oh, contact CVC, oh, that will get covered under CVC. Tell them to ask their victim advocates and let them relate to Tanya. But in the increased security, it's not restitution, but it's CVC. But I'm not sure, did the defense even see what that CVC paid out for, or it says increased security? So,
Have you, many of you had that happen in a case? Have you seen that? Have you had it
Yeah,
happen?
I mean, no one's brought it up, but I just know, we'll get restitution, victim will file a BIS and they'll say, oh, and I paid X amount for a security camera, and we're putting in the notes, we're not claiming this. So
Okay.
we deduct that from what we're claiming for restitution, and then I've also received CDC stuff saying, oh, we paid out security stuff, and I know that victim witness has said, well, we can't claim it for restitution, but fill out the CDC form.
I have had it come up in Wells County. I went to a hearing,
Okay.
lost, there's case law on it.
Yeah.
It's very clear.
I mean, I think then don't ask for it for restitution to comp either, right? But I know the question would be in the breakout whether you know.
Well, I have seen that.
Yeah, you wouldn't know.
Our victim witness is telling.
Okay,
victims
then
they
don't,
can claim
then
comp.
ask, we can update,
and just take it out.
yeah.
Or maybe just not put it in.
We can do that.
We could not put it in if you want us to not put in any security at all.
I don't know the right answer.
Okay. We'll have a discussion about that. We'll try to figure that out. That's a good question, Amy. We'll figure that out. I can send an email out, but we'll try to not put it in the motion at all. Okay? Any other questions about the process?
Are they going to
Clear
be
as
a
mud?
bunch of amended motions?
No, there's only going to be one amended motion, and we're going to update the amount every month.
What if you file it, then there'll be a third one?
You don't file it until
No,
September.
if there's more after sentencing.
Yeah,
Then you'll get another one after sentencing. If it's after sentencing, you'll get another one, correct?
And guys, this is kind of a work in progress.
Yeah, just so you know, it was debated amongst the many attorneys, do we keep filing every amended one? And I have to say, the majority of us said no, that's gonna get to be a mess. But if you find this process isn't the right one,
That's when you just kind of speak up, we can always change it, we sit there and we try to figure out what's gonna be best and come up with a procedure, and then you guys have to tell us if it sucks. And how we need to change it.
And appreciate the secretary's help on this too.
yes. And also for the attorneys, the CLE, you can hear back from Steve.
Oh, yes, Steve said, let me see if he replied again. We do have COAs for this training. You guys just have to do the sign-in sheet, I think.
He has to give us a code
No,
or
he has to
something,
give
right?
us, he'll send that, probably.
He'll send it, okay. He did get CLE credits for the training today, so thanks so much for coming.
Yes,